Okay, as anthropology gets better and better, and mankind looks back at and tries to piece together how we came out of being primordial men, cavemen, there's things that we're missing. We're missing the missing links before all of this, and we're missing links between that and what comes into apparently the Egyptian times, or at least that's what we've been taught, as we get grown up. But now things are changing. Uh, there's lots of these kids that are growing up now, and they're trying to find out the truth. And after lots of studies, and the internet's helping, where they can cross reference enough points that they can get a better idea of what's going on. And no longer does it take somebody an entire lifetime to try to study down something to the libraries of Alexandria and around the world, or the known world, but it can be done at your fingertip without ever having to move. But what we end up finding is that we always thought that 12 to 15,000 years ago, everyone was in caves like this, drawing cave art. They had a primitive language somewhat, spears and things like that, developing the bow somewhat here shortly later, right? And spear points that are getting better and better, pieces of obsidian knocked off that are sharp, that they're skinning animals with, and things along that, like that, like the guy down there in the bottom right hand corner. And now they've done a lot of DNA on them, and they really can't get much DNA. But whenever they do get DNA off of guys, what they're doing is they're finding skulls, and they're getting DNA of people, like Icelandic man that ends up being frozen into ice for so many years. And they're finding that they have the same haplogroups as more like a Caucasoid type race, something that's like a primordial Caucasian type of race. And what they're doing is taking like these skulls, and they're finding that in their teeth, deep in their teeth, because their teeth are still in great shape, that they can get some primordial DNA out of them. And it looks like that they have a slightly bigger bridge in the top part of their nose than we currently do, and that's probably because of wanting to heat up the air as you breathe it in and out your nose. But also it shows a little bit of the Neanderthal twist and things like that that are in ancient skulls. And then they start to develop less and less and less of the nasal cavity, as you see over time, through all of these northern European sites that they found of these, Leicester and other places that they found, and don't have a occipital lobe or the bridge row growing into them very much at all. In fact, it kind of goes away from the first one to the second one that you see. So it's kind of interesting. But then so what we have there is you know attaching pretty well to 15,000 years ago, but we don't have attachments that go past that point. Well, they found the new Aratta civilization, and in finding the new Aratta civilization that could date back to as much as about 10,500 years ago through about 7,000, 8,000 years ago, all of a sudden it looks like maybe our caveman picture we just had a minute ago might look a little bit more like this and a little bit less like it did before. And that sure changes the game, doesn't it? It definitely does. It changes our views on things. Well, another thing that changes views on things is looking at the Egyptian story. The Egyptians primordially took over the area of the Levant. And during the last ice age, let me show you something real quick. Ice age caps. And whenever you look at the last ice age where they show you where it actually encroached onto, where's a good picture I can show you? Well, this is the later, this is end of the ice age type thing. But in reality, let's see if I can squinch this in and how it shows up on here. In reality, half of South America is about ruined, but there's a puddle area in here, this valley, gigantic area that seems to be, very good. Also, there's a giant crater that's created by this, by the way, that no one's really ever gotten into because it's all trapped in the jungle and got burbles, but it could be the world's largest caldera. But at this, because the one that took out the dinosaurs is much smaller and it sits right here. And it's nowhere near as big as the inside of my little loop right now. But the tip of Africa would have actually been hit on it pretty bad too. Even though it's deserting and things, it's almost going to be looked at as something that's real frozen over. This is looked at as being trying to touch constantly. And Australia is even at the bottom tips of it, just destructed. But in that process, they show you here where the top of Africa is already a desert, and it's not. In reality, this would be the fertile plain. The green area right now would very much encroach in on this area, and that's what made this so good and so fertile of an area all through the Tigris and Euphrates in this area. So this is later. This is almost looking at it, I don't, this is the map and the Ice Age don't go along together with this map. This is a correct place where the Ice Age was at one time, but it is not correct on the fact of the deserts, because this would have been a much more fertile area. Even to this day, this looks a little green when you look at it on the map, and they're showing no green at all. But so there's even still some blur of green through here. So at the time, though, green would have been all across through here, and very little tan at all, very little tanning through here at all. And there also was a glacier right where I'm sitting right now, right in this spot, okay? And it filled up and made this lake that's right here. And another lake, Baikal, got made by the receding of that that's up there right now. In doing so, though, what I'm trying to describe is that this was the fertile area, and then as the Ice Age receded away, it ended up becoming a desert like you see, and as it became a terrible desert, what they're finding out now is the Egyptian people left here and came up into the Levant area in a land of time of plenty, and then left and came up into here. Well, oddly, that kind of attach is strange, because now we find out in Sumeria, which would be right over here, Egypt's here, here's Sumeria. In fact, is right in the middle of my dot, not on my pointer, but there you go. Now, here's the thing, the pointer is in Aratta right now. The pointer goes to Aratta. In fact, where you're looking at the Aratta stuff is right in the inside of it right now, okay? And whenever they had their flood in their area in Mesopotamia, that's where they ended up. And it's not Ararat, it's Aratta. But I digress a little bit. In this area down here, they have found tablets now that date back to over 7,000 years ago, or 7,000 BC. And the Egyptian civilization goes back to a little over 5. So it actually seems like this is older than that. And indeed, now they see that the grains that come from here seem to be the ones that were cultured in Sumer, and that they have a direct connective. In fact, you can look at the first king Menes here, and they have a statue of him where he's standing up holding his arm clasp, and it looks just like the priests' statues that are over here in Ur. Okay? But other than that, they also have stories about Aratta itself. They have the story of the Lord of Aratta, and in their books, in their tablets that they have, they discuss being in Aratta at first, and then coming down and doing the fertile plain. The people in the Rata were craftsmen. The people over in Badabara are metal workers. They're the ones that finish the metal. In fact, that's what that word means. And so, and it's the first time, too, it seems like people in this area are farmers. People in this area are doing this. People in this area are doing that. And they're making an industrial area out of the whole area of the Mesopotamian plain. So we look at new DNA evidence that they've got of the Egyptians, and they come to find out that King Tut, they did the DNA test on him and Ramses and a few of the others, and they found out that the results, but Haihioas, the Egyptian dude, wouldn't let anything loose. And so we've sat here for 15 years more waiting on it and haven't been able to get the answer on what King Tut his DNA was. But whenever it came out, they had taken and done a scan of his skull and done the whole reconstructive surgery, and of course, whoops, and of course it ends up looking like this, and kind of European a little bit, but got a little bit of a bucktooth effect to him too. And a lot of the mummies ended up looking a little bucktooth with the recession. But of course, whenever this came out, the black community was all up in arms. They've been saying that, they were the kings of Egypt because there's a statue that's black, because it's made out of black alabaster instead of, it doesn't really show skin color, but Egypt is in Africa, and all these things they're saying. Well, if now they're showing that King Tut's DNA is Western European. Here's a picture of him. What does that look like? In fact, here's the deal. And of course, that looks like Michael Jackson. or whatever. Well, Michael Jackson doesn't look black anymore. He actually turned and tried to look more like Cleopatra. He tried to look more like um, his favorite actress of all time, Cleopatra. So he ended up getting that look. But you look at Akhenaten and these guys, and they say, you know, this is kind of a match here. And it's not a color picture. He has blue eyes. And indeed, his pharaoh here has blue eyes. In fact, that's a key to it. They have a lot of pharaohs with blue eyes to them. But you go back to the earliest dynastic pharaohs, the first dynasty pharaohs that there are, and you find that there are a lot of them that have either auburn, long hair like this, like Tut's grandmother, or they have red and yellow or blonde hair. And it's kind of putting everything on its ears, you know, on archaeology onto, like, you know, what they had originally thought was, you know, going on before. But so ayahuasca gets kicked out, and then next thing you know, that DNA stuff gets released, and what they find out is Tutankhamun belongs to the haplogroup R1b12A2, which more than 50% of all men in Western Europe belong to, and less than 1% of the people in Egypt now belong to. The analysis is just skewed all the way over to that number, and just seems odd. So you know, of course, that made black people crazy. They're just real mad, and I don't know why they would get mad, because I mean, if they ever looked at any of this information, King Tut's tomb, I mean, they say he was black, and they go, really? Because in his tomb it actually shows him killing black people constantly. The Nubians, they tried to do something apparently, and he killed them. And there was a primordial story that some Nubians had snuck in and stole someone's children, and by the time that they had caught them, they were eating them, and so he caused a war on them. And on the bottom of his sandals used to be a picture of Nubians, and so every step he took, he was crushing Nubians. And that perhaps in the war or training of doing this, he had fallen out of the cart and gotten hurt, and this is what caused him to die in the first place. But that he was Western European, sure enough. And you look at all these old dynastic pharaohs and stuff, and I mean, it's made black people mad as hell. But they keep trying to do things like this, like, look, there's a Nubian and it looks like King Tut. They're like, well, that's great if you find one that looks like him, but the DNA and all the pictures and all the science says that it's not. And then, I mean, DNA, I mean, it works in court, it works in life, it works in reality. And it's not just like this one. I mean, he's in the middle. So if we go to early dynasty, and look at early dynastic pharaohs, well, I put pharaohs in there, so it's not going to really. Thank you. And you look at early dynastic pharaohs here and stuff, and what you're finding is people that have this feature. And Afrocentrics have taken to putting a bunch of pictures online, even to the point, if you look up white couple right now, it tries to show you mixed couples. They've gone through this crazy thing they're doing, but chronologically showing these guys that are early dynastic. Not going to show it. How about, and that's just a bunch of plates, because they don't have a lot of depictions in the early dynastic. So let's look at blonde, red-haired mummies. How about that? And so you find that all these early dynastic pharaohs, and they've done DNA tests on them now too, and sure enough, there's Yuya and Thuya right there, the starters of it all, and they have blonde hair. And they tried to say, well, oh, that happens from the natron process. Look, they got black skin. And they're like, you know what happens from the natron process is your skin turning black. Because DNA says that's a Northern European person, and that they're all Northern European. And so the idea now and the concept is that towards the middle of the dynasty, after the big smallpox outbreak came, and there was a time of drought through the area, and it started becoming desert, that they left there and went north through the Levant, and then on into Greek and Rome, and twisted around into Europe and up into Russia, and became all of those different Aryan civilizations, and through Persia and everything too. So, um, yeah, um, that's where they went to, and that's whenever Nubians come in. And it seems like at 25th dynasty, the Nubians actually come in again, like that King Tut fight, but they actually got in good enough to where they became a pharaoh for 93 years, it shows on the record. And then Persians came back in and kicked them out, and then I guess they kept it from then until now, because that bloodline that's there is the one that is not pre-dynastic like this, and shows you the red and orange hair on them. And funny thing about that smallpox too, that smallpox, they found it on a few of the mummies here, and what it shows you is that the smallpox had broken out here a long time ago. And I don't know if you know, but it's the only disease that we've actually ever gotten rid of. I mean, it causes all these problems like this, right? And people get real swelled up. Well, and it can cause a lot of problems. But they found it on mummies too, and so where's the close up of it? Because they had a good one. Smallpox. Oh, so they're showing here this is a mummy of who died in 1157 BC. The lower face also notes skin folds possible due to swelling. So he may have had swelling. He may have died of smallpox. He has pock marks on him somewhat. So he may have died actually of smallpox, but it broke out in the area through this time. And interesting to note that after you get it, you don't ever get it again. If you do, even in future generations, you'll only get one or two little welts. You won't get it bad. But you saw how bad it looked before. I mean, it gets like this on people and tries to really kill you. And what happened to the West Africans whenever they had been taken by the Jewish slave traders? To come over to America, they went to South America, of course, first in the islands, the Virgin Islands, the South American Caribbean, and there they broke out with an incredible bout of smallpox. And so that shows you weird things. The American Indians died of smallpox. We clearly 90% of the Indians we never even got to shake hands with or meet, because they all died off due to transferring smallpox to themselves before we even went west. We were a small crescent on the right side of the eastern seaboard, and but neat thing there is that they broke out with smallpox and they had to get rid of it, and before they could bring them to the United States, and they had a bad breakout of smallpox. And so what does this also say? Well, if they had a big breakout with smallpox, like what it says right here on this sign here, which this is, let's see, inland Abbey Ferry, what they would do is they would take them they just arrived in from Windward and Rice Coast, so that is there you go, those islands. But it tells you down here that they're keeping them free from smallpox because of the danger of being infected. It was a real bad problem, you can tell. But they tell you full 1/2 of the above Negroes have had the smallpox in their own country. So there's a breakout when they're collecting them at. Well, how does that happening? Well, the new Hebrew Israelites claim that they used to be the ones that were there, and whenever Rome came in, they all ran off. Well, they would have already experienced smallpox before, so why would they be getting a smallpox epidemic again? And so this kind of destroys that idea too, that even just in a disease, you can actually prove something like that, much less with the genetics that we just looked at on the Egyptians and stuff. So there it is. And so we're getting closer and closer together to actually attaching the way that primordial man actually goes from Ice Age to now. And it seems like that primordial man came through the Ice Age and had pretty much tried to take over the entire planet, just about short of Africa. And maybe because it was separated and over there by a desert, and that during the last Ice Age, the only good place that was there was the Fertile Crescent that was there, and the area right around the Nile itself. And so they stayed there and they protected that. And after staying there for a couple of thousand years, had protected it and started to build their civilizations, because they had civilized themselves instead of being nomadic anymore and took over the area, and it never changed until a time of plenty became a time of drought, and then they moved north to become the Europeans, because King Tut shows you that even he at that time was still a um, a Northern European due to his DNA, and it's kind of enlightening. It's weird, but it kind of also it makes a whole lot more sense sometimes. But what you find out is that like this guy says right here, um, really, really. And what you find here is despite the refusal of the Secretary General of the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities, Sahi Was, to release any DNA results which might indicate the racial ancestry of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, he wouldn't. But the leak results reveal that King Tut's DNA is 99.6% matched with Western European Y chromosomes. And actually they're saying now it's the ones that have the blue-eye gene is 99.6, and everybody in general is 92%. So whenever the queen used to say that she was related to Egyptians and ancient Sumerians, people thought, what? She ain't got no black in her or nothing. Look at her. It's because she didn't. And the Pharaohs or Sumerians never did. I mean, the Sumerians is where you get the word Aryans from, that the Indians know about. So it all seems to attach onto that. Now I just can't wait for them to finish digging out Aratta and see if we can get it to attach closer together. Then the one thing that we're missing is, how did a people that seem to be Ugg all of a sudden turn into farmers that had massive math skills, agriculture, writing comes out just shortly later. And when we find their first wheel, it's already attached to another wheel and a cart, and that's hooked up to a beast of burden. So it seems like it comes about real rapidly from what would be the Aratta civilization starting and what we see at first Sumeria. There's this big jump right in there, it seems, and the jump seems to be getting closer and closer and closer to our modern time. If we could find another in between, it'd probably just smooth out the whole bump in the road that there is, and there wouldn't be a big bump. Anyhow, sub me, like if you like it. If you don't, I'm sorry. This is what science is actually proving to be true versus somebody's beliefs and things and what they may have thought of what they heard from somebody. Appreciate y'all.